Spacebird Media.
Why do so many people find solace in the crackle of a vinyl record? Let's dive in. This isn't just another vinyl podcast. It's a journey into the heart of recovery through the universal language of music. Each week we share powerful stories of overcoming addiction and life's toughest challenges. Together, we'll uncover how the warmth of vinyl can guide us through moments of vulnerability and strength. So, drop the needle, lean in, and let the music heal. Let's get started.
This is Records in Recovery.
All right, welcome to another edition of Records and Recovery. I'm Ace McKay, always excited to be able to hang out with artists, celebrities, friends, sometimes a little bit of both, but in that, the idea is talking about music and how it heals, how it helps us through those dark times, those seasons of life, and God can reach us through a song. He can reach us through a band, or sometimes it's the whole album itself. But whether you collect vinyl or you just love music in general, we all have a story. So each and every week we get a chance to catch up with someone as they get to share their story. So super excited because not only is he just a great guy, fellow radio guy, but there was a time that I would have gone by the name of Ace Kelly had it not been for this guy working at the same station I was working at. So instead of Ace Kelly, it became Ace McKay because of our guest this week, Dangerous Wayne Kelly, hanging out. How are you, brother?
I'm doing great, man. And you know, the funny thing is that it wasn't very long. I was Dangerous Wayne Kelly, and then after a little while, I was told dangerous isn't safe.
Right.
So we got to drop that name. And then when I got the morning show gig, they had me switch my name back to my actual name.
So now you're Wayne Cordova, right?
Cordova.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. It's Wayne Cordova, and it's been like that for a while. In fact, Dangerous Wayne Kelly feels like an old friend, somebody that I used to know. You know,
you go back and visit every once in a while. You know, he might borrow the truck.
So
keys,
I still have some of his backstage passes hanging in my office here.
Well, and I think for a lot of us old radio guys, because we are old and radio guys, there was that time where you didn't use your real name. Like you used, whatever cool thing, either you had always been called as a nickname and it just stuck, or you came up with a whole nother persona, in the days of Wolfman Jack and those kinds of personalities. You're like, yeah, I want a big voice like that, and I want a cool character name, and now it's all about personal stories and real names, and that's just where it's gone.
And that's where it was for me. I was a local pastor at the same exact time, and so for me, I was serving at my church as Wayne Cordova, and then on the radio I had this different name, but it was just the same guy anyway. And so when I ended up taking that position with our dear friend Teresa, I ended up just going with my regular name just so that everybody would know me and I wouldn't have to kind of figure out who was who.
Yeah. Well, as people get to know the older side of us, talking with Wayne Cordova this week on Records and Recovery, let's go back to Lil Wayne. And I don't mean the rapper. I mean, what was that first, album or cassette that you bought with your own money?
So you're never going to guess this in a million years, but the first vinyl album that I purchased with my own money that I saved up for was Pile Driver, the Wrestling album 2.
Nice.
And it was
there was
World
a second
Wrestling
one.
It was the second one. I missed the first one.
Yeah.
And it was 1987. I was just an 11-year-old kid who, was a big wrestling fan as a kid. And, there was just, that album cover was just iconic, with like Hulk Hogan with the hard hat on. But all the songs in this album were all the wrestler theme songs that were playing on TV. And it was just for some reason, it was like I had to have it. And I saved up so long just to be able to buy it. And I had it on vinyl. I wish I still had it today.
So do you recall what all wrestlers were on it? Because I do remember there being wrestling albums, but I never owned any of them.
Listen, I mean, here's the thing. There were some jams. First off, I don't know if you know who produced it. So the producers on the album were Rick Derringer and David Wolf. David Wolf from Cyndi Lauper fame,
Okay.
was a big time producer, and then Rick Derringer was rock and roll hoochie coo and like all of that stuff.
Right.
And so they were producing it. So literally, there's theme songs on there from Hulk Hogan. There's theme songs from one of my favorite tag teams called Demolition. I think they're here in the back, somewhere for my retro podcast and all that. But there were so many things, but the titles of these songs were incredible. I mean, you literally had a song called Girls in Cars, and it was a theme song for a tag team, and the entire song just says, Girls in Cars, I love girls in cars. And that's it. It was just over and over. I shelled out so much money for this vinyl for these masterpieces of music. And then the best song on the album was a song, you can find this on YouTube, is a song called If You Only Knew.
Okay.
And it was a group compilation song of every WWF wrestler. And they were all together and they were singing this song standing. If you watch the video, they're standing on, podiums, just going back and forth, singing about this song as a chorus about how badly they wanted to beat you up. It was so great.
So kind of a We Are the World of Wrestlers.
It was, we are the world of wrestlers. Exactly, Ace. That's it.
Yeah. Well, as a fellow wrestler fan as well, I was an Ultimate Warrior guy, so he had no lyrics. So it was just, high energy rock and roll.
No lyrics. And oddly enough, his first appearance on WWF television was in that choral group. And so if you actually look on the choral, thing, he's there mouthing the words, going back and forth with his tassels and face paint. It's brilliant.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, I remember for me, first album I ever bought with my own money was Hall & Oates H2O. So it had like Man Eater and Family Man and all those big singles. But it also, too, I don't know if you went through this phase growing up, but my parents would go to the music store with me and would look at the tracks, would read what the titles were, or they would look at the album covers. And if there was anything that was against religion or mocking God or just straight up sexual, they're like, nope, you can't have that. And I think there was one time I was going to buy Def Leppard's Pyromania, and the only reason I got it is because it had a song on there called Rock of Ages. But this came after having to return Prince 1999, to which then I walked home with the Stayin' Alive soundtrack. Not the Saturday Night Fever, but the movie that like is only on like at midnight on certain channels. It's the sequel that only a few people saw.
That's unbelievable. So I'll confess something here. I'm the last of 5 kids, and I grew up in the 80s, and I have to admit I was highly unsupervised.
All right.
And so it was one of those things where I was a good kid. I was good on behavior, a little rambunctious. Would have probably been a little bit medicated in today's day and age. But for me, it was one of those things where I would at an early age get mixtapes from friends. I didn't have like a lot of cash to buy full albums. And so for me, it was a lot of mixtapes, and it was a lot of like compilation albums, or especially soundtracks, like movie soundtracks were the thing for me, because you could get a lot of different songs all at once. You could kind of try out a bunch of different artists. This was, you couldn't even test out music in the 80s. It wasn't like you can just go to a record store and, like you can now, just sample songs on Spotify.
Right.
I remember when like CD stores finally opened up CDs so that you can sample them.
Right.
This is before any of that. So like the soundtracks were the things that really introduced me to artists, and then these compilation albums and stuff. And it wasn't really till I was in high school in 1991 where I had this stretch where I just bought a bunch of CDs at the time, just one right after the other. There was like this glorious time. I was a hard rock kid. I was into, metal and hard rock, and, all in one shot in 1991, I bought the Metallica Black Album, then Pearl Jam 10, Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, Nirvana, Nevermind, and then Red Hot Chili Peppers had a really, big album at the time too. And it was just one right after the other. And I feel like it wasn't until my freshman year of high school that I started kind of, building up what was my actual music taste.
Yeah.
What were the things that made me kind of, who I was at that time.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, especially for those of us that grew up in the church, there was that duality of the bands we were listening to with our friends, but then the stuff you couldn't let your mom know, or, your youth director was like, well, if you're listening to this, you should listen to this. So that's how I found out about Resband and Petra and Striper and, and all of that stuff.
That was the thing. Was I had a conflict. So in 91, I had bought all these albums. I was like, I'm a hard rock kid. In 92, I became a Christian. And so I started going, I was invited to youth group, and it was the typical youth group conversion experience. Right. I went for the pizza. I talked to a lot of girls, and then they shuffled me into this auditorium where I was told that God loved me and had an awesome plan for my life. Yeah. And instantly changed my life. And then the one major conflict I had was because of music. Was I had youth leaders at the time telling me, well, what you're listening to is evil. And even at an early age, I'm going, yeah, but this song actually makes me think about God, and it's not from a Christian artist and all this. And then there was a youth intern at the time at the church. His name was Kevin Parker. I'm still friends with him today. Kevin Parker handed me the first Christian mixtape. It was a mixtape called Faster for the Master. He had written this out, and it had bands on there like Bloodgood, Bride, like Striper, Petra. You had all these Christian rock bands that everybody else was trying to get me, to listen to, and no offense, was trying to get me to listen to Carmen. Right. And, after being a kid who bought the Metallica Black album. Right. And I was like, this isn't jiving. And then Kevin started introducing me to music that kind of fit my taste, while also just nailing me with some real cool, biblical truth.
Yeah. Well, and I actually don the appreciation of Christian bookstores as being the first to let you sample, because there wasn't Christian radio. Right. There wasn't any outlets. You might have like a talk station, a preaching and teaching station that might have like a 2-hour block on a Sunday or Saturday afternoon, but it was an AM out in the middle of some field, and you had to be holding the antenna just right to be able to hear it. But so they kind of were if Christian music is finally catching up with the times, or maybe has in the last 10, 15 years, the one thing it was always cutting edge was giving you that sample, right? Is saying, hey, just come in, listen to what you like, buy what you want, bring back if you don't like it. If I've picked up stuff and just bought it off cover alone,
Oh yeah. Well, there were some cool covers too. You're looking at some stuff, and as a kid who was into metal, and here I am, I'm looking at the Striper album, and I'm like, this is just, who are these guys? This is just, this is cool. I didn't know that music like this could exist in the biblical sense, right? And so that was the cool thing too. I remember working at Inspiration House in West Palm Beach, Florida, where they had like those listening stations. You could take a CD and pop it in, or a cassette, and test it out. And that's the cool part. And then of course, mixtapes, like that was the thing for me again, is like I couldn't afford a full album of one artist, but putting together a whole sampling of all these songs that really kind of started changing my life and giving me this understanding that there's this music out there that honestly it just sticks with you forever. There's songs that for my daughter, like in my life, there's music that sticks with me, because when my daughter was born, I had this whole thing set up. I don't know if you had this when your kids were born, but like the whole idea of I wanted the mood to be right. I had had a music playlist playing in the background, and I had all this stuff. I wanted it all to be all set. And then as soon as my daughter Emily was born, and this was a whole thing where we knew that she was going to be born with some disabilities. We knew that there was going to be something there, but there was just a whole lot of question marks, and we were stressed as future parents. We were really stressed about this, and had no idea what the question marks were going to bring. The second, my wife doesn't remember this because she was busy giving birth, but I remember the second that Emily was born, the song "Great Is Thy Faithfulness" was playing on the iPod, and this was an old school iPod, that I had playing this playlist, and it has stuck with me forever, because that song forever ingrained in my heart, in thinking that no matter what the question marks are, no matter what the stumbling blocks are, God's faithfulness is great, and He's got this. He's the one that has this in whatever situation that you're in. And I roll back to that all the time. It's like these songs that just have these truths that help me to kind of take the next step.
Yeah. You're listening to Records in Recovery, hanging out with Wayne Cordova, who's longtime friend, radio podcaster. Speaking of your daughter, I'm curious in those moments of challenges, because obviously when you know what's coming, but you don't know what's coming, you still, I mean, talk about an act of faith. What was it musically that God maybe helped soothe? Like you talk about that song playing at a time that you're like, I don't know. But in those moments where you still were like, God, why me? Why is this happening to our family? What was it for you that carried you through that?
You know, it was one of those things when you have a child with a disability, and especially in the early stages when there's a bunch of question marks and you don't know, you're getting a lot of bad news, right? Mm-hmm. You're getting a lot of negative responses. You're isolating yourself, or your friends are isolating themselves from you, and all this. You really have just this quietness to spend with God, and just kind of thinking, okay, like, you know, God, where am I? And in this time, I leaned back to an artist that he had spoke to me throughout my time in college, and as I was growing and maturing in some of my musical taste, an artist named Rich Mullins, right? And Rich, I was actually on the air on Way FM when Rich Mullins had passed away. Kevin Avery, who was the program director over there at the time, called me to tell me and said that it was okay for me to share it on the air. And I, you know, here's this young guy on the air kind of, you know, having to give that news. And I just remember his music and his songs were the things that early in my relationship with God and early in my figuring out where I was in ministry and stuff really spoke to me. And then here I am as this new dad holding my daughter in the middle of the night, taking the late night sessions, and I'm sitting there and I'm holding her, and at the same time I'm singing the song Hold Me Jesus, because it so spoke to my situation. I mean, the lyrics are, hold me Jesus, because I'm shaking like a leaf. You've been the king of my glory. Won't you be my prince of peace? And that's what I wanted when it came to my daughter's future, when it came to, you know, what she was facing. You know, all I wanted was peace. I just wanted a peace and understanding that, you know, God's in control, that he's got this, that no matter how much I don't know, he's the one that does know. He holds the future in his hands. My daughter's now 14 years old. She is nonverbal, but she speaks with the use of technology. She loves music. She asks for music all the time. She, you know, she has her own taste and her own playlist that she asks, you know, all of our devices to play and that kind of thing. But more than anything, she is strong and she is tenacious, and she has overcome every obstacle that's been put in her way. And I honestly do think that that's because I believe that God has her. God has her back, and she is taking those steps, independent steps in her gait trainer, in her walker, independent steps, because God has given her this strength, because God's given her a platform also to let people know about how great he is. And that's the thing, is like, I lean back on Rich's music a lot because of just the attitude and the humility behind it, you know, that kind of puts us in that position of, God, you know, you are the King of glory. You are, you know, the one who is sovereign over all this. And I'm not much, but I do know that I need you. And I mean, that's been the story of my life, you know, not just the last 14 years, but way beyond, when I was a really dumb college student, you know, trying to figure out my way. Rich was there, you know.
That's awesome. We're talking with Wayne Cordova, who's a part of just ministry in general, but Lovin on his family, and our guest this week on Records and Recovery. Wayne, as you talk about your daughter, you know, now with technology, that has to be almost like chill bump kind of moments for you now, to be able to communicate with her in ways, not just through music, but in general, that you couldn't before.
Yeah, I think for me, it is, she's in one of my favorite seasons of life, because you know, she's now entering a little bit of stability. She's recently had some back surgery to kind of help with her posture and everything, and you know, she's now in this mode where she's a little bit more confident and a little bit more sure of herself, and we're dealing less with the question marks of her diagnoses and more with, well, what does the future hold in general for Emily? And so, you know, the conversations that I get to have with her, you know, through technology are really cool, because we get to ask her, you know, what do you want, for your future? What do you want to do? The choices are right there in front of her, and she can actually communicate them and lay them out for us. And that's been the thing where it's like all of a sudden we went, here's this girl who's growing and coming into her own, and she switched from Kids Bop all of a sudden, right, to wanting to listen to Taylor Swift and wanting to listen to, all these other artists. And, as a dad, that was kind of mind blowing, because I'm like, when did we graduate out of Kids Bop?
Right.
And, here we are in the car, and she still has her device on her when she's, in the car. And then all of a sudden she'll say praise and worship. And she'll just say that phrase, praise and worship. She's asking me to, turn on some praise and worship, so we can play that. And that is just an encouragement to me, because this is stuff that she's asking for. Yeah. This isn't stuff that she's being forced to. And I'll admit, as a guy who loves retro culture and stuff, a lot of times I do force things, in front of my daughter. I'm like, watch this cool cartoon, watch this cool movie. But when she makes the choices herself and she says, this is what I want to listen to, this is what I want to, this is what I want to communicate and convey, that's been the coolest thing to experience as a dad.
Yeah. Well, in a day and age with social media and stuff, clips resurface all the time. It amazes me with teenagers too, that, the songs they know, the movies or the shows that they've watched. I'm like, how do you know that? And they're like, oh, it's on TikTok. And I'm like, great. At least it's not all just new stuff, that at least you're getting some roots of legacy of, where humor originated and where music started. And like my son, who's a musician, he's 14. He, like the other day, he goes, I'm a huge Zeppelin fan. I'm like my mind was blown. I'm like, I haven't exposed you to Zeppelin. He's like, I just started finding some songs, and then I just listened to the whole album. And I was like, bro, you and I are going to go. So this summer, he and I have deemed any and all concerts that he wants to go to, we're going. So we have tickets we're doing Weird Al. That was one that was like first concert he's on it. Yes. We're doing the Def Leppard show that's coming here. And then we're also doing, Toto is on tour with Men at Work right now. And Christopher Cross, talk about a hodgepodge of
amazing.
80s.
Yeah.
And he's like, he goes, I'd go see Toto. I was like, great. And then when he found out Men at Work was opening, his mind was even more enamored. So I love when they introduce us to their stuff, because they want us to be into their lives as much as we want them in ours. But then in this day and age, they are rediscovering our music at the same time.
I think that's the cool thing, in our, we run a nonprofit, my wife and I, and we have a lot of high school students and college students that serve as volunteers and staff. And a lot of times, it's one of my favorite things to do, is that there's this time where the volunteers show up before the kids and families do. Yeah. And so as they're coming in, they wear like the band t-shirts and everything. And so like, I love doing the old guy quiz,
I do that too. Thank you.
They're wearing like a Metallica t-shirt, and I go, what's your favorite Metallica song? And I'll ask them, and sometimes they're quick to tell me, and sometimes they're like, I don't know, this was sold at Target, Exactly. And I was like, you have no idea how lucky you are to be able to buy one of those shirts at Target. And back in my day, you couldn't do that.
Oh, I know.
It's like you had to go to the special stores in order to make that happen. But like, no, they get to have it freely, Walmart, Target, and everywhere. And but it is cool just to kind of see how some of that music it just transcends time and age, and it's just cool. You say Weird Al, and it's just so funny. It's like Weird Al's coming into our area literally later this fall, and I'm seriously thinking about making that my daughter's first concert, because I just think it's going to be a lot of fun. She's been to some events here and there where there's music, but not like a full-blown concert, and I'm like, I think that might be a really fun intro to live music. She already enjoys Weird Al, much to my wife's chagrin. It's like we'll play stuff, and but she really enjoys that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? That might be a really fun first entry, into the live music scene. Yeah. And to make that happen. And again, it's like Weird Al. It's like, here's this guy. He was older when I was a kid. Yeah. And he's still out there, doing that kind of thing. And I think that's definitely one of those things where it's a uniter, for parents and kids 100%. To be able to do something fun and silly like that.
Of all artists to bring families and kids together, why not Weird Al? That's.
The funny thing is, my first concert that I ever went to was with my parents and my brother, and we saw Billy Joel in concert.
Oh,
And Billy Joel is like our family artist. Like he's one of the first albums that I remember, opening up and putting on by myself. It was the greatest hits album, and it was like it had the 2-page spread kind of thing. And we went as a family, sat in like the first or second row back when they were a little bit less expensive than now, and watched Billy Joel right there on the stage, doing his thing. He's stuck with us forever. I've now seen him like 5 or 6 times. And it's just been so cool, just to experience that and to know that there's a family connection to that.
It's great. It's Records and Recovery, hanging out with Wayne Cordova this week. Wayne, I just on a personal note, I would love to just give you some time, because obviously as you and I being in radio, we've also had the opportunity to work with people similar in the field. But our friend Teresa, who recently passed, you guys did a show together, obviously being a part of a team show. I know what that's like when you have your radio spouse, so to speak. And what was it about her that you either learned to love about music? Because she was a big music kid too.
Oh, yeah. First off, Teresa was a light. I mean, she was somebody who lit up the room when she walked in. She was so much fun to be around. Yeah. She took a chance on, I'll admit, she took a chance on a 25-year-old kid, to be her morning show partner. I was working already at the station. I was doing, all these different time slots and everything. And she took a shot on me, to come to join her in that booth. And it was a large part because we already had a good time, every time we were around each other. Yep. And, when it came to music, it's like she had this great way of pulling out the truth in every single song that we played. And sometimes it was like, it was a simple thing where, here's a song by Michael W. Smith, and like the purpose of this song is laid out, really easy. And then she would, bust out another song, by like Stephen Curtis Chapman. And it would be one of those like fun, poppy songs. And he's singing like "Wake the Neighbors," and like this whole thing's coming out. And then she'd open up the microphone and literally just hit you right in the heart of something you needed to hear. This nugget from this song, this piece of biblical truth that God was trying to tell you in this fun, peppy thing. There's just like a real banger. You're rolling in the windows, you're screaming it out. And then she was able to pull out the truth out of nowhere. Yeah. And that was the thing where she always saw God's truth. She always saw where God was, in everything that we played and everything that we, were a part of. And even behind the scenes, some of the fun stuff, we had a lot of musical fun, just behind the scenes, doing stuff in production, getting ready for another event or something like that. There was always a song, on her heart. Yep. One of the cool things I remember was off the air, and in my role as a pastor locally, I actually had her come to our church to sing and to do special music. And so not only could she, really connect people with the truth of music that she was playing, but man, she had a wonderful singing voice, and she also connected people to God through the words that she chose to sing out loud too. I mean, she's amazing. And, I was so blessed to be her friend, and that she took a shot on me.
Yeah. I didn't know that she could sing. That's news to me.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Well, Wayne, before I let you go, man, I appreciate your time. I just want to ask you, what do you love about where you are with God right now?
Oh, man. Okay. I got to tell you. So we, a few years ago, we started a nonprofit called Possibility. And we serve families like ours, families that are affected by disability, that have kids with disabilities. And we offer a bunch of different programs, both locally and online. And we do support groups. We do recreational respite, after school programs, and all this. And we do a lot of different programs for kids with disabilities and families. And that's the fun part. Then the not so fun part is the behind the scenes, where my job as the CEO of the nonprofit is to kind of keep things running. Yeah. And the cool thing about where I'm at right now is that my dependence on the day-to-day, work of our ministry, the day-to-day survival of our ministry, whether that means financial or structurally or anything like that, my dependence on God in order to accomplish these things has increased. We went through a period of time where we were in a serious financial struggle. We were kind of going through a really hard time in this ministry, and my wife was trying to encourage me through it and everything. And at the end of it, we just realized that, if God called us to this, he's going to see us through this.
Amen.
And so we realized that, it's like we just got to put our trust in him and then see it happen time after time. And then the thing that we learned to do is that even though we're in the midst of all the struggle, when we see God come through, call that out and acknowledge that, because it still might be tough. But here are all these glimpses of God showing up and saying, listen, I've got you. Just like I had Emily, just like I have her, I have what you're doing here at Possibility.
That helps us understand the gray hairs, right? It's like, oh, I got that one from this experience, these from those. So Wayne Cordova has been.
You say gray,
guest.
I say no. There's
that's
no
true.
hair.
I mean, why do you think I wear a fedora all the time? Are you kidding me?
I need that look.
Wayne, thanks so much for your time, man. Of course, like, subscribe, and follow so you don't miss future episodes, Records and Recovery, and we'll be back next week. Thanks, buddy.
Records and Recovery is a Spacebird Media production and a part of the Thesis Radio Network. Find more episodes anywhere you listen to podcasts or at thesis.com.